Russia has failed to meet the deadline for capturing Pokrovsk and Kupiansk set by dictator Vladimir Putin. The timeframes have once again been postponed, stated Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. At the same time, the head of the Foreign Intelligence Service, Ole Ivashchenko, reported to the president on the political and economic situation in Russia, as well as on the mood within society and Putin's inner circle. As Zelensky assured, the appropriate conclusions have been drawn following this.
We will also continue to apply our long-range sanctions. The special services, and above all, the security service of Ukraine and the Ukrainian army, have been assigned the relevant tasks.
Analysts from the Institute for the Study of War state that Russia is focusing on capturing Pokrovsk rather than attempting to encircle the broader Ukrainian bridgehead in the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad agglomeration area. The analysts believe that Russian forces are prioritizing the capture of Pokrovsk for a number of reasons.
It is possible that the Russian Federation plans to leverage the informational impact that the capture of the city would generate, or hopes that taking Pokrovsk will facilitate subsequent efforts to close the pocket.
On November 15th, the defense forces destroyed the road connecting the villages of Deva and Pokrovsk. In this way, the Ukrainian military disrupted the enemy's logistics. The Russians will no longer be able to use this route to advance toward Pokrovsk with light vehicles. The partisan movement Atesh reports fighting near Pokrovsk. The situation in Mirnohrad is exacerbating the internal crisis among Russian troops operating in this direction. After precise strikes by the defense forces on Russian positions in the suburbs of Pokrovsk, Atesh agents are recording the disappearance of soldiers and possible cases of desertion. Atesh also reports an increase in the number of inquiries from Russian soldiers who want to cooperate with the movement. Meanwhile, North Korea has significantly reduced its supply of artillery ammunition to Russia due to depleted warehouse stocks. This was stated in an interview with Reuters by Major General Vadim Skibitsky, deputy head of Ukraine's Military Intelligence Directorate. Ukraine and Russia are resuming negotiations on prisoner exchanges according to the Istanbul format. This was reported by the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Rustem Umerov.
On the instructions of the President of Ukraine, I recently held consultations with the mediation of partners in Turkey and the United Arab Emirates to restore the exchange process and secure the release of our people from Russian captivity. As a result of these negotiations, the parties agreed to activate the Istanbul agreements.
According to Umerov, this concerns the release of 1,200 Ukrainian citizens.
Technical consultations will be held in the near future. They are intended to formalize all procedural and organizational aspects. We are working without pause so that Ukrainians who are to return from captivity can spend the New Year and Christmas holidays at home, at the family table, and with their loved ones.
President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that the Ukrainian authorities are working to initiate another round of negotiations to end the war.
And of course, the front line, without question. And of course, diplomacy, without question. We are working to initiate another round of negotiations so that there is still a prospect of ending this war.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan believes that Russia's war against Ukraine is at its closest point to ending. The minister considers negotiations between the countries to be inevitable.
No one can move anywhere. Only those who disregard losses are advancing. The war must end. We consider negotiations to be inevitable. This could happen in Turkey, or it could happen elsewhere. But I believe that this peace will definitely come.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban also said that Russia and Ukraine are very close to achieving peace. US President Donald Trump also expressed confidence in an interview with GB News that Russia's aggression against Ukraine will end soon.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance explained why American President Donald Trump is engaging in dialogue with Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. In an interview with Fox News, he said that Trump is pursuing aggressive diplomacy, which is necessary to achieve peace. Vance noted that there is no need to agree with Putin's decision to invade Ukraine. But according to him, in order to achieve peace, one must be strong, engage in dialogue, and practice aggressive, active diplomacy. The U.S. Vice President also spoke about Trump's position.
His doctrine is to have the strongest military in the world, to focus on peace, but not to let journalists in Washington dictate whom you can talk to and how you conduct diplomacy.
According to Russian journalist Alexander Nevzorov, all of Trump's speeches and public statements have nothing to do with his real intentions. He spoke about this on his YouTube channel. In Nevzorov's opinion, Trump hides behind the mask of a naive oddball, but in reality,
he is systematically, methodically, and very carefully taking away President Vladimir Putin's closest political allies one by one over time. This deliberate process is weakening Putin's support network step by step.
Nevzorov notes that in most cases, the American leader succeeds at this. Meanwhile, the conflict between the US and Venezuela is escalating. As CBC News reports, the Pentagon has presented Donald Trump with options for operations against Venezuela, including strikes on ground targets. And the head of the US Department of Defense, Pete Hegseth, announced that the United States of America is launching an operation called Southern Spear, aimed against drug cartels in the Western Hemisphere. According to CNN, some members of the Trump administration admit that the US actions are aimed at removing Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. In Slovakia, school students protested against statements made by the country's Prime Minister Robert Fico about the war in Ukraine. According to media reports, the incident took place during a meeting between the Slovak Prime Minister and high school students in Poprad. Specifically, Fico stated that the European Union would allocate 140 billion euros, in his words, to continue the war in Ukraine. He said in effect that Ukraine does not need help and should not be given aid. His words outraged the high school students, to which the politician responded, quote, "If you are such heroes and support the war so much, then go there." After that, the students began jingling their keys and then stood up and left the hall altogether. One of the students took down the Ukrainian flag. This situation was commented on by political analyst and Ukrainian Armed Forces serviceman Kirilo Sazonov. He notes that the mood of Slovak society differs from the position of Fico, who supports the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin.
They are raising money, helping Ukraine. He grimaces, complains, and accuses the opposition of scheming.
In particular, his cynical statement that support for Ukraine should be stopped sparked a wave of outrage among students. But Fico escalated the conflict even further.
Fico, as a person, in my opinion, is not very smart. Instead of immediately correcting something, explaining, or inviting discussion, he said, "And if someone disagrees, then go there, go to Ukraine and fight."
Sazonov notes that neither Fico nor his associates expected such a reaction from the students. According to the political analyst, this is a complete disgrace for the Slovak Prime Minister. It should be noted that this is not the first such incident. At the beginning of November, Fico was supposed to speak at one of the schools in Poprad, but the students drew a heart in the colors of the Ukrainian flag, as a result of which one of the students was questioned by the police. Fico's speech was cancelled then.
US President Donald Trump stated that during his recent medical examination, the doctors praised his test results, highlighting their positive nature, but could not answer any of the follow-up questions about those results. While speaking with the press, Trump also mentioned that the doctors gave him an MRI scan.
I had an MRI. The doctor said these were the best results he had ever seen.
A journalist tried to clarify, was it an MRI of the heart or the brain? To this, the American leader replied,
I have absolutely no idea what they were checking. But regardless of what they examined, they did it excellently.
Earlier this summer, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stated, US President Donald Trump has been diagnosed with chronic venous insufficiency, a condition in which blood flow in the lower extremities is impaired. Her statement came amid a series of media reports about Trump's swollen ankles and a bruise on his arm. Photos have circulated online showing Trump sleeping during conversations with journalists. In the photos, US President Donald Trump is seen sitting with his eyes closed during a meeting in the Oval Office. The images were distributed by the press service of the governor of California. However, the White House denied this information, stating that the US president was not asleep and was answering numerous questions from journalists. US President Donald Trump stated that he no longer supports Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene.
She has a completely different way of thinking than I do. Something significant happened to her over the last month or two, and as a result, she has changed. Politically, I think her voters will no longer be satisfied or pleased with her actions. They now want to challenge her in her district in Georgia. And, that's really a shame. She has regrettably lost her excellent conservative reputation.
Marjorie Taylor Greene has long been an ally of the American president. Their conflict arose due to sharp disagreements with the White House. Trump previously stated, all that crazy Marjorie ever does is complain about everything. He also published additional comments in which he called the Congresswoman a cheap political football and even referred to her as a traitor. Earlier, Russian propagandist Olga Skabiva publicly praised Greene for her attempts to stop military aid to Ukraine. At that particular time, journalists and members of the press pointed out that Greene was focused on opposing Ukraine. and this earned her points from the Kremlin. Russia is focusing on capturing Pokrovsk rather than attempting to encircle the broader Ukrainian bridgehead in the Pokrovsk-Mirnorad agglomeration area. This opinion was expressed by analysts from the Institute for the Study of War. The analysts believe that Russian forces are prioritizing the capture of Pokrovsk for a number of reasons.
It is possible that the Russian Federation plans to leverage the informational impact that capturing the city would generate, or hopes that taking Pokrovsk will facilitate subsequent efforts to close the pocket.
At the same time, Ukrainian counterattacks on the northern flank of the pocket and the presence of Ukrainian troops in Pokrovsk are hindering the advance of Russian forces and their ability to close the pocket. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported that Ukrainian units have been withdrawn from the settlement of Novovasilivske in the Zaporizhzhia region to more advantageous defensive positions. The monitoring project Deep State notes that Russian occupiers launched an assault on Novopavlivka in the Dnipropetrovsk region. The invaders took advantage of the weather conditions, specifically the fog. There, the Russians set up a pontoon crossing between Yalta and Dakhne and transported about 10 pieces of equipment across.
Unfortunately, they were detected too late, so the enemy managed to disperse their landing force in the central and southern parts of the village, with the troops scattering into shelters.
Meanwhile, the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces, Oleksandr Syrsky, stated that in the Pokrovsk and Ocheretine directions, Russian troops are trying to break into residential neighborhoods. However, Ukrainian soldiers are inflicting significant losses and containing the enemy's advance. On November 15th, the defense forces destroyed the road connecting Selidov and Pokrovsk. In this way, Ukrainian forces disrupted the enemy's logistics. The Russians will no longer be able to use this route to advance toward Pokrovsk with light vehicles.
On the night of November 16th, units of the Ukrainian Defense Forces struck the facilities of the Novokuybishevsk oil refinery in Russia's Samara region. The strike on the refinery was confirmed by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. According to the agency, the plant processes about 9 million tons of oil annually. The enterprise produces more than 20 types of commercial products. In particular, the Novokuybishevsk refinery supplies the Russian occupation army with top-grade fuel for jet engines. The strike on the refinery was carried out by the UAV units of the Ukrainian armed forces.
Explosions and a fire were reported in the target area. The extent of the damage is being clarified. In addition, a UAV storage base belonging to the Rubicon unit and a fuel and lubricants pumping station in the temporarily occupied territory of Donetsk region were hit.
Meanwhile, the results of the massive attack on Novorossiysk on November 14th have become known. According to satellite images, drones from the Special Operations Center Alpha of the Security Service of Ukraine destroyed 4 S-400 surface-to-air missile system launchers. As reported by the Telegram channel Operative AFU, citing a source in the SPU, they were located on the grounds of the Kuban Red Banner Regiment's military unit. In addition, 2 enemy radars were hit.
In total, approximately 12 S-400 Triumph air defense missile system launchers were stationed on the grounds of the military unit. There is a high probability that they were also damaged as a result of the attack.
On the evening of November 15th, loud explosions rocked Volgograd. As is known, there is an oil refinery located in the city. The governor of the Volgograd region, Andrei Bocharov, reported on repelling the drone attack. According to him, 3 people were injured. The temporarily occupied Crimea was also attacked. According to the Telegram channel Crimean Wind, explosions were heard near Sevastopol, in the area of the Saki airfield in Novofedorivka and in Simferopol. Earlier, it became known that after a Ukrainian drone attack, the Saratov oil refinery on the Volga stopped its primary oil processing. This was reported by Reuters, citing sources. It is noted that the facility may remain out of operation until the end of the month. The successful strikes on the Saratov oil refinery were carried out by Ukrainian forces on November 11th. According to the publication,
sources reported that the strikes may have damaged the plant's only primary processing unit. Its nominal daily capacity is about 20,000 metric tons, or 147,000 barrels of oil.
The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine also clarified the results of the strike on the Ryazan oil refinery on November 15th. According to the agency, 2 oil processing units, a petroleum product storage tank, and a pipeline trestle were damaged at the facility.